facing an impending water crisis. A report released by government think tank Niti Aayog has said that nearly 60 crore Indians faced high to extreme water stress, and about 2 lakh people died each year because of lack of safe water. The predictions are equally gloomy. 21 cities, including Delhi, Bengaluru, Chennai and Hyderabad, are predicted to run out of groundwater by 2020, and 40% of Indians will have no access to drinking water by 2030. These alarming statistics and predictions need to be taken seriously if India is to survive this acute water shortage. But are we prepared or even aware? To talk about this, I'm joined today by Abhijit Mukherjee. He's Associate Professor at IIT Kharagpur, and Michael Kugelman, Senior Associate for South Asia at the Woodrow Wilson Center. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for speaking with us. Abhijit, I'll start with you. A lot of details in this Niti Aayog report. It also focuses on a state ranking, and that was its initial and prime purpose, to rank how various states have handled their water situation. But I want to look at the broader picture and the scary predictions this report makes, where about 1 crore of Indians are going to run out of drinking water by 2020.
Yeah, that's, I think that's about correct. Because in India, we typically depend on groundwater in most of the places to get our drinking water sources, because surface water is too polluted. However, the groundwater is, dying out fast because, a lot of irrigation pumping is going on across the country. And, what I tend to call India is going through the largest groundwater abstraction in the human history. So, yeah, I think the predictions are on the line.
Okay, let's come to the reasons. What are the primary reasons, Abhijit, in your view, of why we're running out of groundwater so fast?
Well, groundwater is like any other natural resource, right? So parts of it, it gets renewed every year, because when the rainfall comes in, part of it gets recharged, and like the water that goes off throughout the year would replenish, in the monsoon months. But this process, as people think, is not that fast, and it takes actually a few years to do that. Now that's the replenishable part, and then there is a non-replenishable or non-reclaiming part, which you cannot really recharge within a year or a couple of years. And what people are doing is we are abstracting groundwater at a rate which is never sustainable. We are abstracting groundwater at 10 times the rate it will get recharged. So obviously, in last few years, the groundwater level has drastically fallen down in parts of the country, mostly in the western states, but also in the eastern states, and many parts of the country has become water stressed to extreme water stressed.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so I was saying, so if we understand this correctly, we're just digging deeper and deeper and pulling out groundwater, which is not being replenished at the same rate. I want to come to Michael Kugelman for a quick, take on what this report actually points to. This is happening in large parts of the world as well, Michael. But your thoughts specifically on the situation India finds itself in light of this report?
Well, I think that the report is spot on, and I agree with what was just said, that you basically have overall a groundwater crisis. I mean, groundwater, what is groundwater? Groundwater is essentially a security blanket for water, right? It's what you turn to when surface water supplies are running dry or too dirty. And so essentially what India is doing is that it's tugging at the security blanket, at the safety net, if you will, to the point that the water tables, the groundwater tables, are plunging significantly. And not only does that have implications for shortages and scarcity, but the further down you go to extract groundwater, the more polluted the water tends to be. So, as the overall supply of water grows ever more precarious, you have to worry even more about water pollution, which obviously has major implications for public health. So, I think that the bottom line here is that the more that India has to dig deeper, so to speak, to get groundwater, the more it's going to cause problems for pollution. And I think in terms of why this is happening, I think you really do have to look at agriculture and particularly irrigation methods. I mean, you have a lot of flood irrigation, which is a type of irrigation that essentially allows farmers to draw on water, draw on a lot of water whenever they want to. And there have been efforts around the world in countries that are experiencing water stress to introduce drip irrigation, which is a more efficient way of using irrigation water so that you're not literally flooding the crops all the time. But it's going to take a long way to get to that point. I think there also need to be efforts to try to think a bit more about what type of crops to subsidize and emphasize. What we see, not just in India, but in Pakistan and elsewhere around the developing world, is an emphasis on the most water-guzzling, water-intensive crops, and that clearly has implications for water stress as well.
Let's come to the bit about awareness, and I want to come to Abhijit on this point because some of the things this report says, and remember it's a government think tank which has put out this report, the Niti Aayog, it says 70% of the water is contaminated, 75% of households have no access to drinking water. You're talking about 21 cities which will run out of drinking water in 2020, and barely a year and a half away. Are we as alarmed as we need to be, Abhijit, on an individual level, on a government level?
Well, there is an alarm. I would not absolutely concur with the 2020 doomsday scenario. I would say, it's in the horizon and it's moving fast. And if we don't take a precaution just now, we can eventually go to that rate. In contrast to what the Niti Aayog report might have said, I've downloaded it yesterday, but I have not really read through it. What we have found through our own study, and I've been working with NASA for last 5-6 years, and through some of the pioneering state-of-art instrumentation, we have found, in most part of the country, groundwater is really depleting very fast, but in certain parts of the country, actually, it's replenishing back. Even the deeper water is replenishing back. And, to look at the cause for it, we found out that, in these small areas, not widespread, but small areas, the people there, or the local government or the local community, they have done something very ingenious, which has resulted to, bring back the groundwater coming up. And although, those places, as we know that they are the dry places, and we have recurrent drought there, but those water management strategies that started in 2002, 2003 now have started to pay back after 14-15 years. So if we really look for good strategies.
What are these people doing, Abhijit, in these areas that you talk about? You're saying they're using some ingenious methods. Do tell us, what are they doing?
Yeah, so on a very personal level or community level, they are going for artificial recharge or small ponds or whatever. But what I found in many of the areas, through some of the government schemes, they have done a lot of what we call infiltration tanks or infiltration ponds. And in the rainwater, like they are basically collecting the rainwater that is otherwise running out and storing the water, and that water eventually would seep back to the subsurface. Now, it's not an instantaneous process, it takes time, and that can help. The other thing that I found out in Gujarat that they have done, this is back in 2002, 2003, when they have introduced a project called the Jyotigram project. What they did was, just like the gentleman said, that irrigation or crop production takes a lot of water. And if you can somehow manage that water, it's possibly you can stop some of the waste. Now, it's not necessarily that.
No, I want to come to that point back to Michael because, and I'm glad Abhijit is striking a optimistic note. I don't know how comfortable we can be at this point and just hope things work out. Are we doing enough on a government level, on the level of local bodies? And the point you made about methods of irrigation and the choice of crops, you well know that agriculture is already a very sensitive subject in India. The farmers are already under a lot of stress. It seems unlikely that any government can make decisions of what crops are grown on the basis of how much water they use.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. None of this is going to be easy. And, unfortunately, I think that we've reached the point where offering doomsday scenarios about impending water scarcity is no longer irresponsible or sensationalistic. I think we do have to worry that, I don't know about 2020, but certainly not too long from now, you have to worry about outright scarcity in some parts of India. It's true, agriculture is something that's very politically fraught. Farmers, of course, are a very key political constituency. So for government officials to all of a sudden say, well, you're not going to get as much water as you used to, we're not going to subsidize as much irrigation water as you'd like, clearly that would not play well politically, and especially now when, of course, we've got we're getting into election season in India with a national election in about a year from now. But I would go back to something in the report that I think is very important to highlight when you want to talk about how to move forward, and that is the need for more data. It's a very simple thing, but unless you have access to more information about what exactly is going wrong with the water situation, you're not going to know how to act. You're not going to know what to do on policy levels, and I think on the level of consumers within society. Unless more people really understand and appreciate the extent of water shortage, they're not going to have an incentive to try to conserve more, for example. So I think that's a very important thing that this report highlights: the need to have access to good data, and simply the need to have good data on the whole. But absolutely, I agree with you that this is not going to get any easier. And you look at broader trends, you look at demographic patterns, population growth, you look at the increasingly acute effects of climate change, which has led to significant glacial melt in the Western Himalayas, which in many ways feed some of India's key water supplies. Which means there's just going to be less water for reasons that have nothing to do with what the government or with what Indians on the whole may do. So it's going to be really difficult to move forward. But I would argue that the time to act really is now, because we're talking about water. It's a non-renewable resource. It's not going to be possible to get back. It's been lost, or it'll be very difficult.
No, and the fact of the stories we've seen coming out of a hill station like Shimla, which has run out of water and has asked tourists not to turn up in this holiday season, saying we just don't have enough water. There's Bengaluru, which has various stories of water shortages. The other point I want to quickly bring up, Abhijit, is also the quality of water. We talk a lot about water shortage, but what about the quality of what is available, how polluted it is, and how harmful that could be? There seems to be very less awareness and data or information on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, like when we talk about water shortage, we typically want to think it in a more quantitative way. Like the quantity of water is not there, but actually it's a combination of quality and quantity. So even if you have a bucket of water and half of it is not usable because the quality is bad, you cannot live with just half the water. So in a major part of the country, and mostly in the parts where you have more water, these are the areas where you also have a lot of pollution. And this groundwater pollution, mostly groundwater, this pollution is actually more natural, so you cannot really do much about it. So it's there and it will be there. So we have, in the eastern parts of the country, we have a lot of arsenic in the groundwater. In the western part of the country, you have a lot of fluoride and salinity in the water. Either way, if you drink that water, you're going to get sick.
Wow.
So that kind of constrains a lot of water that actually were even available. So, what we call the Indus Ganges Brahmaputra basin, these are the areas where almost 70% of India's groundwater is stored. And if we do a calculation, possibly, only 30% of that can be used because the rest is polluted.
Wow, that is scary scenarios.
Drinking water is a bigger problem.
Exactly, drinking water is what we must look at first. We talk about day zero, scenarios the world over. We've seen it in Cape Town, and Michael, I just want your comment on that, because that is one example of how a local population has fought back, has pulled back when we speak about Cape Town specifically. That level of awareness needed very quickly in India, you think, and is enough really being done? What can can be done. Really, what happens to populations that run out of water is not just about the primary need. There are other situations geopolitically that arise with it.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's all kinds of risks. Obviously, there's the public health concern when you don't have access to water or to clean water. In a country like India, where you have a number of states that are oftentimes at loggerheads over river water sharing, you have to worry about the potential for violence over disagreements over water. And clearly, if you look at the broader geopolitical picture, you've had long-standing tensions between India and Pakistan over water sharing, where Pakistan has oftentimes accused India of holding back water from flowing into Pakistan. If you have water shortage, and I should say Pakistan's water situation is even more serious than India's, if both of these countries not too far down the road have outright scarcity, the stakes will rise even more, which could lead to certain drastic acts, such as perhaps India deciding to back out of the Indus Waters Treaty, and that would have major implications for India-Pakistan relations. I think the economic consequences are important to highlight here as well.
Yes.
India, of course, is urbanizing very rapidly, but still agriculture is a key component of the economy. And if you have a situation where so much water is being allocated to agriculture, a key part of the economy, but you're running out of water. The agriculture situation could really suffer, and that could have major implications for the economy. So in terms of what to do, there are some simpler solutions. I would argue something as simple as doing more to patch up leaks in canals and trying to fix up existing water infrastructure. That could be a big help. It doesn't take major long-term actions to deal with this problem. Of course, there's that too. But there are some simple solutions on the demand side that, include just making existing infrastructure better so that you don't lose as much water. And that could help ease what really is becoming a very serious threat.
You spoke about the impact on the economy. This report talks about a possible 6% loss in GDP by 2030 if the situation today is not acted upon. I hope more states and indeed more citizens take the situation very seriously and don't look at it as something as far away on the horizon. It's almost here. Thank you so much, Michael Kugelman and Abhijit Mukherjee, for speaking with us today on Bloomberg Quint.